Greetings to everyone. This is your instructor for Business 492, Organizational Leadership, Jamie Schramm. As I mentioned, our week number 4 class falls on June 19th, so it's Juneteenth. So making a little video just covering and highlighting some of the key topics that we would cover if we had a collaborate session and calling to highlight a few things. And if it helps you to reference this video and to watch it, if it helps you learning and understanding, please definitely use it. If you're like, yeah, I'm good, I don't need it, that's fine too. But let's dive in. Let's talk about a couple different things for this week. So one thing they talk about right away in the beginning is the difference between leadership theory versus a leadership model. So theory is an explanation of some aspect of leadership, some behavior of leadership, right? It's kind of the explanation behind it, where a leadership model is an actual like emulation or kind of prescriptive for a given situation. So the models kind of get into what's the situation of leadership and what are we facing. So that's kind of the difference. The theory explains a piece of it, maybe in a very practical, easy to access kind of way, but that model starts getting into kind of specific situations or specific applications of leadership. Contingency leadership. So the goal is to determine if a leader's style is task or relationship focused. And then does the leader, right? How does that tie into the situation at hand, right? Does it match the leader's style? Leader member, task structure, or position power. So does the way that the leader leads match the situation? So it's contingent on the set of circumstances and situation at hand. And some of the questions you ask, are changes needed? Are changes needed in the leader's style or maybe organizational culture? So does the leader maybe need to improve relationships? Do we need to help foster that? How we structure tasks? Do we need to empower followers? Is an organization, do we need to put some structure and some legitimacy around our org chart? Gain power, gain legitimacy, and the things that we're asking from the people around us. Then they talk a little bit about the continuum leadership model, right? So the goal is to determine which of the 7 leadership styles that the continuum leadership model defines is appropriate in decision making, right? And it's from high control to very low control, right? So, state that the decision is not open for discussion. That's very prescriptive, definitely not collaborative, definitely the leader kind of telling everyone what's going to happen. The next step would be to make a decision and then convince everyone it's the best. So kind of make the decision and try to sell it. Present the decision and then ask for questions. Present a decision as a subject to change based on input, like here's the decision, but based on input. State the situation and then ask for recommendations, and then the leader makes the decision. So getting some input, being somewhat being informed by the people that are providing the input. And then employees make decisions based on boundaries, or employees make ongoing decisions, right? So you go from very high control, very prescriptive, to very highly empowered and employees making the decision, right? There's not a one style fits all. There's each of those styles given the situation, right? Given what is being faced, what is the challenge at hand, could be appropriate. The path goal leadership model, which ties into contingency, right? The behavior of the leader influences job performance and satisfaction. I think we know that. We've got social science studies that go back decades, right? Showing that how a leader behaves, the behavior of the leader influences job performance and satisfaction, right? The goal is for the leader to best determine which maximizes the performance of their followers, right? Is it being directive? And in some cases, especially with a younger, maybe more inexperienced team, that could be the exact right thing to do. Is it supportive? Is it participative? Or is it achievement oriented, right? And of course, the worst thing a leader can do is empower someone who's not ready to take that mantle of empowerment and do something with it, right? They maybe don't know, they maybe haven't had the opportunity, right? That can actually be worse than a leader who's more directive, right? And is more into the telling mode. Sometimes that's very necessary. So we don't ever want to get caught up, right, in this perfect world and think that applies to each situation in front of us. So locus of control, it comes back to this locus of control again, right? And people who have an internal locus of control, right, believe that they can impact the world around them. Their behavior matters, and their behavior can have a positive influence on the situation around them, either the situation and or the people around them, right? That external locus of control, you believe that things happen to you. You don't have a lot of influence. Really doesn't matter what you do. Okay, very important for those that want to influence others and for leaders to have an internal locus of control. Believing that I possess some skill, I have the ability to positively influence the situation at hand. I have the ability to positively influence others, right? I mean, that's the definition of leadership. So leaders need to develop that internal locus of control, right? That external locus of control, right? Where, sometimes we say things happen to you. We have to be careful with that, right? Because, if you're sitting at the edge of your bed every night saying, why me? Why me? Why did this happen to me? Right? You kind of need to flip that around and start asking yourself, okay, how can I positively influence the set of circumstances in front of me? As bad as they may be, as challenging as they may be, right? How can I positively influence them? And then that's kind of the first reflection, that first layer. Okay, how can I positively influence maybe the ick that's around me? And then what's my role in the ick being around me, right? What have I done to create some of the ick, right? So what kind of ownership can I take of that situation, right? And it goes along with the old cliche that things don't happen to me, things happen because of me, right? So things happening because of me, right? That's internal locus of control. Things happening to me, that's external locus of control, right? And of course, the two extremes are never the best, right? But leaders need to have that internal locus of control, believing that they can positively influence the world around them. The normative leadership style, right? When should the leader take charge, or when should they let the team make the decision, right? And that's driven by a lot of factors. Again, there's not a one size fits all, right? It could be time driven, right? If we need to make a decision quickly, if it's an emergency type situation, right? If it's a crisis, which we shouldn't have a lot of crises, right? But if it feels very urgent that we need to make a decision quickly, there's also development of the team. Can they make the decision? Do they have all the information that they need to make a decision? Can we provide them that in an accurate and timely manner? Right? So there's lots of things to go into that, right? Should the leader take charge? Certainly there's times when that's absolutely appropriate. Is there times when the team should make the decision? There's certainly time where that's absolutely appropriate. So normative leadership style factors, right? Those are some things to think about. What's the significance of the decision, right? So you might be, is it a strategic, a tactical decision? What's the importance of the commitment? So what are we committing to this decision? Maybe are we putting a lot of resources behind it as far as maybe people or time or money, right? What's the expertise of the leader? Does the leader maybe have some special skill set? What's the likelihood of a commitment from all involved, from all the stakeholders, right? Do we have group support for the objectives, right? Does the group have expertise? And then what's the overall team competence? Those are all important factors to think about, right? And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of approach to this. So normative leadership styles, right? The leader just decides. Sometimes that's appropriate. Sometimes the leader consults, maybe one-on-one with different team members. Maybe they consult the entire group, right? Sometimes maybe they facilitate a conversation or facilitate the decision, and then sometimes they just maybe delegate the decision, right? So again, not a one-size-fits-all. Leader decides, much like some of the other styles that we just looked at. Leader decides, right? Leader has the control versus leader passes that control off and delegate, right? And it's kind of a continuum, right? So prescriptive leadership models tell exactly which style to use in a given situation, right? So prescriptive, it's contingency and normative, right? They tell us, okay, if this is your situation, this is the leadership style you should use. The descriptive leadership models, which is the path, goal, and continuum, right? They identify some variables without specifying which one to use, right? So there's some flexibility in that, right? The prescriptive say, if A, then do B, or if A and B, then do C, right? Where the descriptive leadership models say, hey, maybe you have A, B, and C going on. These are some things to think about. These are potential approaches to it, right? So, for people who like things very black and white, the prescriptive leadership models make a lot of sense, right? For people who maybe are okay with functioning with a little bit of gray area or a little more ambiguity, perhaps the descriptive leadership models speak to them a little bit more. So the other thing that we talk about that I share, in leadership, if we want to determine, where is our team at and are they capable of being empowered, when we say something needs to be done, right? Give a direction or directive, right? Or even state an objective that needs to be accomplished, right? If we hear people say back, well, who said or who gave that order, right? That really shouldn't matter, right? And the U.S. Navy teaches leadership that way. You can judge a lot from where a leader's at in their leadership and from where a team is at. If someone asks the question, well, who gave the order? Well, that shouldn't matter, right? If we're all part of a team and we're all in it together, who said shouldn't matter, right? Because if there's two things to look at here. From the leader standpoint, if you ask someone to do something and they say, well, who said or who gave the order, is the leader, you have to ask yourself, okay, so what level of relationship and trust have I built with this person? But also, when I give an order or I give a directive, do I tend to tie someone's name to it? Like the CEO said, right, we need to do this, right? So you can kind of destroy your own credibility if you borrow upon some high-ranking person in your organization rather than to say, hey, we need to do this, right? If you borrow upon a name drop, right? So that can be an issue. And then you also just have to look at your own personal relationship with the person that you're speaking with, right? And is that built on trust and mutual goals and shared fate and things like that? The other aspect is from the follower, right? Who gave the order? Well, really, why should that matter, right? What are you in it for, right? Does it really matter who gave the order? If it's a good objective, right? Why does it matter who said, right? So we can kind of identify some opportunities for growth, right? For both the follower and the leader when we hear that statement. And then our weekly question, I would ask you to reflect upon this, right? Is all leadership situational, or are there one or two leadership traits or behaviors that apply to any situation, right? And I'd ask you to think about that Simon Sinek video we watched, right? Where we talked about trust and going after the thing you want, right? And remembering where you came from. Those might be a couple of things that regardless of the leadership situation, regardless of how the followers or the leaders are positioned, might be good things to think about, right? But ask you to reflect upon that, right? Maybe what are 2 or 3 leadership behaviors that pretty much we should be exemplifying pretty much every day and would be of value to bring to most situations, right? Might be calmness, right? Might be clarity, right? But I think you all could probably come up with 2 or 3. So just ask you to think, the situational aspect of leadership, are there still some key leadership traits that could apply to any situation? With that, I hope you've enjoyed this brief little summary of what we would have covered this week together. As always, feel free to ask questions. If you have questions, reach out. Remember to make 3 posts, right? Make 3 posts during the next week here prior to our next meeting. So between June 19th and June 25th, make sure you make a minimum of 3 posts in the discussion board. One of those posts, a response not to my original question, but to one of your classmates. With that, I wish you a really good week. And as always, as I said, if you have questions, do not hesitate to reach out.